Okay, I can only take the theonomists' word for what they say, what they are claiming, what they are saying. And here is an example of the problems of this new theonomic vision taken from Greg Bonson. That's really where these folks are taking this theonomy from. And my assertion is that their view of theonomy will lead to theocratic bullying. Theocratic bullying. Let's hear what Dr. Joe Boot has to say about the first table of the law of the Decalogue, the Ten Commandments. So if we look at the Ten Commandments just real quick, Exodus chapter 20, you can go to the reiteration of this in the book of Deuteronomy, of course, but Exodus chapter 20. So the first table of the law includes the first four commandments, okay? All the way up to the Sabbath day. And then the other six contain our duty towards our fellow man, okay? So the 1689 Baptist Confession of Faith in chapter 19 of the law of God says that God gave to Adam a law of universal obedience. Universal obedience. That is, obedience for not only Adam and Eve, but all of their posterity, all the way down to our very own time today. Written in his heart. Notice, this law was written in his heart. There was a particular precept, of course, of not eating of the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And there was a particular precept also of be fruitful and multiply. That was a command. So that was every bit a law as the prohibition from eating from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. The positive command of be fruitful and multiply was a command. It was equally a command. Those were explicit commands, blatant commands. What the confession is saying is that this law, this universal law, a law unto which there's to be universal obedience, is actually the Decalogue, written in the heart of Adam. The same law that was first written in the heart of man, that is, of Adam and Eve subsequently, was delivered by God upon Mount Sinai in 10 commandments. So what the confession is saying is that the 10 commandments antedate, they precede the actual giving of the 10 commandments at Mount Sinai to Moses. They predate that. Written in two tables, the first four containing our duty towards God, the other six our duty to man. My assertion is this: any government, especially in the United States of America, and we've made this very clear in our First Amendment to the Bill of Rights, but any government should keep its dirty, grimy, sinful, satanic, disgusting hands off the first four commandments. Those are the commandments that refer to worship in accordance with the dictates of one's own conscience. And that is where the government purview ends, or the government authority ends. They do not get to say over how Christians worship, or Muslims worship, or Hindus, or Buddhists, or anybody else.
So what we should do, what's important, I think, is that we need to honor the Sabbath by resting one day in seven. And then we need to honor the Lord as best as we can. If you're asking whether I would be in support of Sabbath laws in Western countries, yes, I would actually, because I think we've lost a great deal by the abolition of our Sabbath day acts that protected most people from being forced to work.
And which day in seven would you pick?
Well, I do believe that the resurrection, there's the significance Amen. Of the resurrection, the first day of the week. There was a reason the church recognized that as the Christian expression of the Sabbath.
Okay, there you go. And Joel Webben said amen to the Sabbath being on Sunday because of the resurrection. I always ask Christians, do you celebrate Easter? Do you celebrate Easter once a year? What are we celebrating at Easter? Oh, the resurrection, right? So we celebrate the resurrection once a week on Sunday, but we also celebrate the resurrection once a year at Easter. What is the deal here? Well, the fact of the matter is, but you heard what Joe Boot said, right? First and foremost, and this is why theonomy will lead to theocratic bullying. I think there should be Sabbath laws instituted. Sabbath laws instituted. And I say to that, no. Absolutely not. First of all, and then Joel Webben asked the right question. What day would that be? Well, I believe because of the resurrection that the solemnity of the fourth commandment, remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy, the seventh day is the Sabbath of Yahweh, your God. Okay? For in 6 days, Yahweh made heavens, the earth, the sea, and all that in them is. Notice, back to creation, recalling creation, and rested on what? The first day of the week. No, the seventh day. By the way, Jesus also rested on the Sabbath day in his death. Okay? He was crucified and died on a Friday. Then that Sabbath day, which was a high Sabbath day because one of the holy days, one of the Sabbaths or holy days of the year coincided with the seventh day Sabbath when Christ was in the grave. So Christ is crucified on Passover, which is Nisan 14. He's in the grave for the first day of the Feast of Unleavened Bread, right? The unleavened one, the sinless one, was resting on the Sabbath day, the high Sabbath, because it coincided with the first day of the Feast of Unleavened Bread. And then he was resurrected on Nisan 16, which was Sunday that year. And that was the first day that the Jews would celebrate the festival of first fruits. The festival of first fruits, which I believe is why Paul, in his letter to the Corinthians, 1 Corinthians 15, talks about Jesus being the first fruits of those who were raised from the dead. Even though Jesus wasn't the first one ever resurrected from the dead, was he? No. But Paul calls him the first fruits. I think there's a meaning there. There's a reason why. Because Jesus, again, rose on Nisan 16. Now, Nisan 16 is not always on a Sunday every year. Sometimes it's on a Wednesday, a Thursday, a Tuesday. All right? Christians usually celebrate Easter on the wrong date. Okay, it was the date. Look up the Quartodeciman controversy, which Philip Schaff has said in his exposition on the Quartodeciman controversy that this issue is not even yet cleared up to this day. And I said, amen, it's not cleared up to this day. It should be Nisan 16 if Christians want to celebrate the resurrection in that way on one day a year. But no, most certainly the seventh day Sabbath is still the seventh day Sabbath, not the first day of the week. If we go to Matthew chapter 24, for example, Jesus foretells the destruction of the temple. He also foretells signs of his second advent. He's blending those two prophecies in here in Matthew chapter 24. But if we go down to, let's see, abomination of desolation, right here. Pray that your flight might not be in winter or on a Sabbath. Okay? Now, he's talking about the temple destruction that would come 40 years later. Did Jesus expect his people to still be recognizing the Sabbath day 40 years after his ascension into heaven? Yes, absolutely he did. Okay? So the Sabbath still stands. Yet I would never advocate for the government trying to enforce the seventh day Sabbath on anyone. They worship in accordance with the dictates of their own conscience, and the government has no say in that. So, the folks of Rhode Island would not sign the United States Constitution. They would not. They didn't care how beautifully written it was, how it separated the powers, legislative, executive, and judicial quite nicely, how that would lead to this idea of checks and balances in our own government. They didn't care how beautiful the U.S. Constitution was. They would not sign it without a Bill of Rights. If it didn't have a Bill of Rights saying what the government cannot do, they weren't going to sign it. So thank the triune God of heaven for Rhode Island. As Americans, we should all be thanking God for Rhode Island. So, what else? Roger Williams, the Bloody Tenant. This goes back. Roger Williams, the Bloody Tenant, before the United States was even a country, when we were colonies over here. The Puritan separatist, Roger Williams, versus another Puritan, John Cotton, was the Bloody Tenant is what Roger Williams wrote. Massachusetts Bay Colony for holding, Roger Williams was banished for holding, quote, strange opinions which ran counter to the views of the magistrates of Boston. He afterwards founded the colony of Providence Plantation, modern-day Providence, Rhode Island, and returned to England to secure a charter for his colony. And while he was there, he wrote the Bloody Tenet of Persecution as an answer to the magistrates of Boston who had banished him, and one of them in particular, John Cotton, whom he singled out as holding especially dangerous views concerning theocratic government. That's exactly what Joe Boot was just talking about here. A theocratic form of government. And they can flower it however they want. Right here we have a dividing line. The dividing line is those first 4 in the 10 Commandments the government can keep its grimy hands off of. And let's see, what else do theocratic government. Massachusetts Bay Colony government appeared to be a democratic republic in which officials were elected by popular vote, but in reality was a theocracy, government informed by a specific religious belief or by God's law, because no official could hope for election who did not support the legalistic religious views and practices of the colony. And by the way, legalism should be something that all reformed people should recognize. We should recognize as inappropriate. Legalism. The Pharisees, the rabbinical Jews, were legalistic. No reformed person should be legalistic. You recognize the law as bringing death. The law brings the death penalty. That's what it is for. It is to expose sinfulness. It is not to make anyone righteous. That's not what it has ever done. Williams claimed that no elected official of government had the authority over religious beliefs and conduct of the citizenry. Agreed, 100%. Roger Williams knew history. He wasn't about to say that the government has a right over the dictates of people's own consciences. Governments only had authority over civil matters. The church alone should preside over ecclesiastical concerns, and one's individual beliefs were the person's own business. Let's see. The Bloody Tenet of Persecution was burned in England when it was published in 1644 and sparked a literary duel between Roger Williams and John Cotton over the next few years, arguing the 12 central claims of Williams' book. The work informed the philosophy of the colony of Providence and eventually proved influential in the formation of the government of the United States of America, notably in the Bill of Rights concerning separation of church and state, which, by the way, did not mean the church can't participate in state government. It never meant that. It only meant that the state does not dictate with respect to people's worship and practice in their religious beliefs. The state keeps its hands off, has no power, no authority over those matters, ecclesiastical matters. So that's my, in case anybody's wondering about theonomy, yeah, this is it right here. Enforcement of the first 4 of the 10 Commandments. And then I would ask too, what about the papists who, right here, the second commandment, verse 4, this is the second commandment. You shall not make for yourself any carved images or any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or that is in the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. Okay, what about the papists who bow before statues of Mary or of any of the other saints? Okay, bowing down before them, praying to them, all these things. Should we outlaw that too? Right? As idolatrous and superstitious nonsense that it is, should we outlaw that? Should we have the government step in and outlaw that? I would say no. No. The weapons of our warfare are not carnal. They are not carnal. They're not spears, swords, bows and arrows, weapons of any kind. They're not that. The weapons of our warfare are that we destroy logismus. We destroy words. We destroy arguments, propositions. False, erroneous, lying propositions is what we destroy with truthful propositions. Just like Martin Luther said in his Bondage of the Will. If you take away assertions, you take away Christianity. There is no Christianity without assertions. And so as Christians, we argue against falsehoods, errors, and lies. And we argue against those errors with the truth. The truth. So, and that is a type of warfare. It is. But it is a war of words, a war of propositions. And these propositions are false, leading to theocratic bullying is what that would lead to. Always has, always will. So that's one of the reasons I will stand against this theonomic nonsense. And I'm not talking about, general equity of the judicial and civil laws. There's definitely everything to be studied and gleaned from that. But we're talking about enforcing the first 4 of the 10 commandments here by law. And I say, no, government, keep your hands off. Anyway, let me know what you think in the comments down below. We'll talk to you soon. Soli Deo Gloria.